I think we should move on, yeah, and turn to segment 8. Just wanted to see whether you paid attention. Very good. Segment 9, the red one. We are done with qualitative inquiry. We are not done because narrative is a part of it. It's another component. And here, very general, broad summary or 2 points. Narrative, sometimes I also call it simply storytelling, is just like any other discourse mode. Yeah, another discourse mode is arguing or lecturing, which I'm doing right now. Giving directions is another discourse mode. And storytelling, telling a story, is one of those. Yeah, nothing special about it. But then there's this thing that narrative lends itself, stories lend themselves to bring out characters, yeah, to put characters into space and time and to show how they differentiate themselves with regard to others, how they align themselves, yeah, with their family, or disaffiliate themselves with their family or with others, how they construe themselves as agents, yeah, or as recipients, and also how they make sense of continuity and change. Remember, these are the 3 identity dilemmas that are mentioned, I think it was in segment 5 or 4. Yeah? So this is where narratives are particular interesting material for looking deeper into identity. And this will haunt us and come back. Narrative as being relevant for identity, identity construction. Good. So this just sending in your direction. And again, I will try to link storytelling, the analysis of storytelling and the analysis of discourse to the kinds of innovating classroom activities. Yeah? Getting the students involved in real world challenges, like sending them out and observing some real people. Uncovering connections, and then also, of course, as always, managing complexity, uncertainty, and also change. So those are the goals that are always lurking in the background. Yeah, how can we get our learners with the kinds of things that we're doing in class in that mode? So, narrative. Building on your question from early on, in observing, in the project where the learners go out to observe, I purposely let them not interact, let them not involve verbal means, so that they see what is visually available, not what the auditorial area displays, so to speak. So not what is hearable, only visible. And when they come back after 5 weeks, they realize that there is a lot of stuff going on and that we can actually make quite a number of assumptions. Like I saw you nodding when I said that waiting for a train and waiting for somebody to come it looks just very different. Yeah, you can differentiate those. He's waiting for a train, she is waiting for somebody to arrive by train from very early on. Yeah, you don't need a lot of notes. So what I would like then to, like the learners to realize is that the bodily cues are more basic than the verbal cues. Now, this may be a little bit of a challenge to some of you. But the argument is that the verbal interaction is based or grounded in bodily interactions. It is part of it. It's not the other way around. And by showing also those little clips where the body is ahead of what is happening verbally, we realize that our words are following our bodily intentions. Okay? So that means that the study of verbal interaction always has to sit on or has to be grounded on nonverbal interaction. The nonverbal is more basic than the verbal, or the verbal is nested in the nonverbal. Now, for those who study interaction and conversation, this is nothing new. But those who are brought up with the study of language, linguistics, doing translation, for them, they learn the language first, and then they learn to make sense of speakers. And there's something at odds in this sequence. But that is a different topic. Good. So in addition then, the study of stories, of storytelling, is grounded in verbal and nonverbal activities. And the argument then is that looking at people interacting with others, telling stories and recording these stories, we get an insight into a very important aspect of human interaction. So let me break this up and flesh this out a little bit. Let me start with the 3 dimensions of identity again. Remember, same, different. Am I same? Am I different from others? Both is true, if you ask the truth question. But it is contexts in which we sometimes affiliate with our family, with our teachers, with our institutions. And in other contexts, we don't. We are angry with our institutions, with our teachers, sometimes even with our family members. Yeah? It depends. It's not once and forever. So this is a navigation of difference, alignment, affiliation, sameness. Similarly, agency. Am I the product of others, of world? Yes. My parents, my teachers, my kids, my students, all impact on me. Am I producing, making, having an impact on world? Yes, I hope so. On my students, on my kids, I hope so. Sometimes I doubt that. On my friends, yeah. That's where we are, again, in this navigation. Both are true, but in certain contexts, we emphasize this aspect. In other contexts, we emphasize that aspect. And lastly, change and constancy. Am I the same as yesterday, the day before, the month before, the year before, a decade before? Yes and no. We change, but we are also somehow the same. So again, both are true if you ask the truth question. But more importantly, in what context, in what situation do we draw on I'm the same person as I used to be? And in what context do I draw on and make the argument I have changed? Those are the questions. And the argument here is that narrative is a particular proper candidate for the navigation of change and constancy. Why? Because of the temporal dimension. In stories, we have something of a temporal dimension. Let me flesh that out a little bit more. Here we have a simple story. I made that up, so I'm not smoking anymore. Okay? Yesterday, I went to the store. I bought a package of cigarettes. I smoked them all up, I got very, very sick. 4 propositions, 4 clauses, yeah, stack up in this order. And I would argue, yeah, this is a story. It's a rudimentary story. Why? Well, first of all, these 4 actions all are sequenced in the same way. Yeah, they follow each other. You first go to the store. There, then you buy a package of cigarettes. And it's also already at that point, you went to the store in order to. There's a causal issue. Yeah? And you bought the package of cigarettes. And after that, temporally, you smoke. And you probably bought the package to smoke it up. Again, a causal. And now you got very, very sick. And now we are putting this together and say, well, you know, if you smoke very quickly, very fast, the whole package, you may get sick. I once got sick when I was 13 from cigarettes. Okay, but that's a long time ago. I have changed. So what we have here is a sequence of events that is not only temporally ordered, but also we assume causally. Yeah, the next one gives the reason for the one before. And you got sick because you smoked them all up. And there's also a moral to the story, like serves you right. You know, who is so stupid and smokes a whole package of cigarettes in one row? Okay, so this counts as a story. Okay, no problem. Now what about this one? Yesterday I got very, very sick. I smoked up all my cigarettes. I went to the store. I bought a package of cigarettes. Same propositions, same clauses. The order is switched. How does this sit as a story? Well, I would say I smoked up my cigarettes, went to the store, bought a package of cigarettes. That is consequent. Yeah, that is sequential in the temporal order. But the first one, yesterday I got very, very sick. I smoked up all my cigarettes. Well, my mind has to do a lot of work. You know, because there are some people who, when they are sick, they start smoking or drinking. And some even believe it helps. But it doesn't quite sit right, right? I mean, this is not the link between the first and the second clause, between those 2 propositions. There is no real causal link, or it's very difficult to construct. So this does not qualify quite that way as a story. Now here's the last one. Yesterday I smoked up all my cigarettes. I went to the store, bought a package of cigarettes. Again, sequentially fine, but it's also boring, like this other one as well. Yeah, smoked up my cigarettes, went to the store, bought the package of cigarettes. So why? Why are you telling me this? Okay, so we have that here, and then I got very, very sick. How so? Yeah, the listener to this supposedly story-like sequence would say, how did that happen? What happened? Did you catch a virus, or you know, what was wrong? It doesn't make any sense as a story, right? All 4 propositions make sense, but sequenced, they don't make sense as a story. So this gives you a little bit of a feel of what there has to be in stories. Now, I give you a couple of definitions here. I usually hesitate to give definitions of narrative. Most of them are formal, structural. And the first one is a very broad one. It's a sequential arrangement of events. But so are recipes, right? First you take a spoonful of sugar, then you take a cup of oil, and then you take, these are also, and you better follow them in that order and not take the oil first and then the sugar or whatever. Yeah, okay, but that's one of the definitions, a sequential arrangement of events. Then the other presupposition is that there has to be a character or several characters, and they are in time and in space and engage in actions. Yeah? And these actions then become sequentially arranged. There's one very widely held definition that a narrative consists of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's not wrong, but what this definition captures is very broad, and it has been refined by others that if the beginning and the end cohere, then you have something like a story, a narrative. My favorite definition is more of a functional sort. All these formal structural definitions, they are not wrong, but they usually are only good as first beginning hints. And this is the way I would say, functionally speaking, a speaker breaks into narrative, uses a narrative or puts in the narrative gear when he or she wants to make something, usually past, relevant to the here and now. Something that happened yesterday, smoking cigarettes and getting sick, or something that happened a year ago or a long time ago. But the important part is to make it relevant for the situation, for the context within which we are talking. And that's where narrative, to me, is functionally situated and plays an important role. All right, very briefly also covering narrative inquiry. Work with narratives. Work with narratives and work on narratives. Now, work with narratives is typically in interviews. We interview other people, we interview teachers, we interview learners in order to find out how they struggle, tackle particular issues. We interview or elicit narratives from people who share their subjective experience, something that happened to them, in order to find out what is that experience like. I don't have to go through that experience. I can't set it up experimentally. So I elicit reports of those experiences. Okay? So that is the major way narratives have been used in narrative inquiry. It's also, in particular, in the social sciences and the human sciences, like in applied linguistics as well. But in literary science, people also work on narrative, the structures of narratives, the different genres, how narratives have changed over the hundreds of years of narrative history. So narrative inquiry starts with these stories, with these narratives. And the stories remain the analytic focus. That's the material a narrative inquirer works with. And it also, this type of work has to have an analytic lens or an analytic orientation. Just telling stories is not necessarily narrative inquiry. The inquiry is analytic. It works with material. Telling stories can be in narrative inquiry, but typically it isn't. When we tell stories, we entertain, we inform others. We do all kinds of things with the stories that we tell. But narrative inquiry is from above, so to speak, metaphorically. To me, the most important part is it asks, why did a particular story surface? Why this story here and now? In a particular situation, somebody put in the narrative gear and told a story. Why? Why didn't he or she use a different discourse mode? So that would be a concern that leads to, I think, interesting answers within the realm of narrative inquiry. All right, so bringing it to a conclusion a little bit. Again, this is more of an abstract segment. And in the next 2 segments, I will flush it out with examples. We will work with actual narratives. Maybe I even send you something beforehand so we can prepare. But what is it good for? What do we need it for? Narratives and narrative inquiry. As I already hinted at, identity. Identity work with narratives, and then for the analyst, using narratives in order to do identity analysis. We'll get in particular at people's experiences, their subjective way of making sense. This is the same as in observing others. We assume that they know what they're doing. They know what they are saying. They are the experts. They are the experts of their experience, and that's what we are interested in. So these are sometimes single cases, but an interview or a narrative that we overhear is exactly the attempt to share these subjectively lived experiences. Then narratives manage personal relationships. If you want to be a good friend of someone, you have to disclose some of your stories. You have to share some of your stories. Otherwise, your relationship will remain very superficial. It will not become a real relationship. In particular, if it is going to be a romantic relationship. So stories sharing experiences function within this realm very relevantly. I have studied apologies, people who did something that wasn't quite right and they had to apologize. And they all went into a large story of what happened. And sometimes you say, well, why are you telling me all this? Well, they want to make up. They want to fix the relationship again. Before, it was a trusting relationship. Then this person did something that I found disappointing. And now, this story is the attempt to apologize and bring the relationship back into the old way it was before. Then storytelling are very, very important these days in branding. How institutions brand themselves, they have a past, they have a future, and an identity. How people or products brand themselves. I looked at beer commercials, in particular Budweiser. Fantastic storytellers. What it does is it gives the brand a name, a recognizability. And this is done by stories, not just by images anymore. That used to be the past. Now it has to be a story, and it has to be a story that sits well with the audience or the viewer. And then, of course, narrative inquiry also is good for, ultimately, for studying what narrative is. Trying to bring and illuminate, bring light and illuminate these formal definitions, these structural definitions of narrative. But that is a different topic of study. So, summing this up now, and trying to bring this back, again, at a more abstract level, but still relevant, what I'm trying to argue is that narrative, just like the whole package of qualitative inquiry, is interested in how people manage a sense of who they are. They maintain a sense of being different and similar to others. They maintain a sense of being an agent and being a recipient of other people's actions. And they maintain a sense of being the same over time, but also having changed. This is what narratives in qualitative inquiry are supposed to deliver, and I think they deliver this quite well. So what is at the core here is the interest in others, as in qualitative, and the goal of learning from others, as in qualitatives, through their stories, through what they share with us. And this ultimately leads to a transformation of the person who is involved in doing the inquiry. The learner will not be the same after he or she learned whatever it is that they have learned. So this is exactly then where narrative inquiry helps, facilitates an engagement with real-world challenges. It connects the classroom with the real world, with the stories of real people. It manages complexity and uncertainty. Yeah, again, we have no objectivity here. We are forced into the interpretations that we can share with others and that we can discuss with others. And it also helps developing the habits of lifelong learning. Brings me to the end of segment 9. And we have a little time for some questions. And as I mentioned, I will come back with the next 2 segments and we will do some exercises with stories, with narratives, some discourse analysis. Similar to the one that I did today with you, taking you to the Kyoto station. Hope that wasn't so far. I hope you don't mind it was Japan. Just kidding.